Registering as an international architect in the UK is not easy. It can be frustrating, the guidelines can be very confusing, and it can take ages. But I did it, and you can too, and I'll show you how. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Sarah, and in this video, I want to walk you through the process of registering as an architect in the UK if you have studied abroad and if you have qualified outside of the UK. I want to do this from the perspective of somebody who just moved to the UK, a bit like when I was a few years ago. I also want to give you some insights that I gained throughout the process that will hopefully help you avoid the mistakes that I made and speed up the process for you. This is valid for 2023 as the procedure is changing, but more on that later in the video. Okay, let's get started. So, you're an architect who qualified abroad and moved to the UK, and the first thing that you realize when you move to this country is that the title architect is protected by law and regulated by the Architects Registration Board, also known as the ARB. To be able to call yourself an architect and act as such in the building industry, your name needs to be on the Architects Register. The ARB does not directly recognize any qualifications that were awarded outside of the European Economic Area countries. However, there is still a way to register as an architect in the UK if you have qualified abroad, and that is through the ARB Prescribed exams. To understand how this works, it will be useful to understand how the architecture education system works in the UK, and this can be divided in 3 parts. Part 1. After graduating high school, students in the UK who want to study architecture in the UK undertake a bachelor's degree called B-Arch, and this is their part 1. So after graduating their bachelor's degree, they secure a part 1 degree which allows them to apply for jobs as architectural assistants, and many students do this right after graduating, which allows them to gain some work experience here in the UK. Part 2. After this 1 year out of experience, students usually apply for a postgraduate degree known as an M-Arch. So it's a 2-year program that is a postgraduate program, and it's important to highlight that this is an M-Arch because there are different types of master's degrees that are offered by universities. Some are called MSCs, so Masters of Science, MAs, Masters of Art. And it's really important that the students undertake a Masters of Architecture, an M-Arch, that is ARB recognized, to allow them to secure their Part 2 qualification. Part 3. So after this, master's students can either opt for doing a little bit more of work experience as an architectural assistant Part 2, or they can straight away start enroll in their Part 3 course, which is a year in practice. So it's like a part-time course that you undertake in university while you're working in practice, and it is called professional practice in architecture, where you kind of like do assessments based on the projects that you're doing in the office. You write a case study, you do some assignments, and at the end of it, you take a 3-day exam and an interview. And finally, when you pass, you secure your Part 3 degree. After they pass all of this, they obtain a Part 3 degree, and now they have Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. And with those 3, they can apply to register as architects with the ARB. The whole process takes a minimum of 7 years, but depending on people's circumstances, it can take much longer. Okay, cool. You understand all of this. So how does that relate to you as an international architect who wants to register with the Architects Registration Board? Well, technically, as an international architect, you need the same documents that a UK trained architect needs to register with the ARB, and those documents are Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. So Part 1 and Part 2, in your case as an international architect, can both be acquired through a process called the ARB Prescribed exam. So every couple of months, the ARB will open some dates for the examinations where you can apply and take the exam. And when you pass, then you secure Part 1. And then in another round of exams, if you pass, you secure your Part 2 qualification. Part 3, on the other hand, cannot be acquired through the ARB prescribed exams, and you will need to go back to university and enroll in a course, in a part-time course, Part 3, that will allow you, alongside with 2 years of experience, to secure that Part 3 qualification. Okay, so what does this exam consist of? What do I need to do? So in order for you to take this exam, you need to go through a few steps. The first one is make sure that you're eligible for the exam. I will leave a link down below about the eligibility criteria for the exam, but essentially, in order for you to be eligible to take the Part 1 exam, you need to have done an equivalent undergraduate degree in your own country that is about 3 years long. And in order for you to take the Part 2 course, you need to have done, on top of that, a master's degree, an equivalent of 2 years of postgraduate qualification. And in my case, for example, it was a 6-year degree in Morocco, and so I was eligible to take Part 1 and subsequently Part 2. The second step that you need to take is to pay a fee. And this is quite steep. As of October 23, the fee is £1,950. So this might be something that you will need to plan for in advance. The third step that you need to take is to fill a comparative matrix. And that consists of mapping a few projects that you've done in the past, either at university or in practice, against 33 of the criteria that the ARB have set as a standard. I've done a video about this, by the way, and you can check it here if you want more details about this. The fourth step is that you need to prepare and submit a portfolio of work, about 60 to 80 pages, where you kind of present this evidence that you have cited previously in your matrix and show to the jury how you think that evidence meets those 33 criteria. And then finally, once you've done all of this and that you have applied and the jury had the time to consider your application, then and you have met at least 50% of the criteria, then they will invite you to sit an interview where they will give you the opportunity to kind of like meet the other criteria that you haven't met on the portfolio, but meet them in verbal form and explain why you think you meet those criteria. Okay, so once that's done, they will decide if you have passed or you have failed, but they won't tell you straight away. The longest 2 weeks of my life. Eventually, you will get an email that will inform you of the decision, hopefully a positive one, and that's Part 1 done. And you have to do it all over again for Part 2. Important things to know. Even if you have fully qualified as an architect abroad in your home country, and even if your course was 5 years long or even more, you still need to take Part 1 and Part 2 on 2 separate occasions, and they need to be taken in that order, and fortunately, you need to pay for both. So £1,950 times 2. The second thing that you need to know is that the Part 3 course can be undertaken before Part 1 and Part 2. And if you can, I would strongly recommend that you do that. And I'll tell you why. The work that you produce in your Part 3 gives you a deep understanding of some of the criteria for the exam. But most importantly, it gives you evidence that you can present for the ARB prescribed exams. And this is what I did. I presented my case study that I produced for the Part 3 course, And I also submitted some assignments that I did through the course as part of my evidence for the Part 1 and Part 2 exams. This is important because these criteria can be very difficult to cover if you haven't done the Part 3 course. The other thing that you need to know is that you need to find a course, a Part 3 course, where you can enroll that will accept your application without you having the Part 1 and Part 2 qualifications. And not all universities do that. Some of them do. For example, the University of Nottingham did that for me, and I'm really grateful for that because I believe that that was a big part of me passing the Part 1 and Part 2 exams. Great. So now that you have secured your Part 3, then your Part 1 and your Part 2, you can take these documents, submit them all to the ARB, and register as an architect in the UK. There has been a change of regulation recently, and just a couple of months ago, the ARB announced that they have the power now to recognize some of the qualifications and determine which international qualifications it wishes to recognize through the establishment of Memoranda of Understanding, MOUs, and Mutual Recognition Agreements, MRAs. These are agreements where two or more regulatory organizations in different countries agree to recognize each other's qualifications. This, in principle, makes it easier to practice as an architect in a different country without having to go through that lengthy process of the ARB prescribed exams. But you still need to go through an assessment procedure and pay a considerable fee. These have now been established with the United States, New Zealand, and Australia, and it is my understanding that the ARB are aiming to establish these agreements with even more countries, so watch this space. I will leave a link down below to the main page referring to this. A lot to talk about, so I'll leave it here for now. Let me know in the comments below if you thought this was useful and if it clarified some things for you. If you're going through the process of the ARB prescribed exams, then make sure you subscribe to the channel because I post videos weekly. As an example, to get started, I explain in this video here how you can identify the gaps in your submission and fill them, and I give an Excel sheet for free that you can download that will help you get started. And I'll see you in the next one.